Hello and welcome where every story feels like a conversation over a warm cup of coffee. Today we dive into a classic Sherlock Holmes adventure, narrated from the perspective of Dr. John Watson. Settle in with your favorite brew as we transport you to the foggy streets of Victorian London. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more cozy mysteries. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Foggy Evening Visitor. It was a late October evening in the year 1895 when London lay shrouded in a fog so dense it seemed as though the city itself were submerged in some ethereal sea. The gas lamps along Baker Street struggled valiantly to pierce the gloom, their feeble halos swallowed by the swirling mist that clung to every cobblestone and crept beneath every door. The air was thick with the mingled scents of coal smoke, damp wool, and the faint brackish tang of the Thames carried on the chill breeze that stirred the curtains of our lodgings at 221B. I, Dr. John H. Watson, had but recently returned from my rounds, attending to patients whose ailments ranged from the mundane to the melancholic, a consequence of the city's unyielding damp and drear. My bones ached for the warmth of our sitting room, and I found solace in the familiar comforts of our quarters. Mrs. Hudson's crackling fire, the aroma of her freshly baked scones wafting up from the kitchen below, and the ever-present clutter of my friend Sherlock Holmes's eclectic pursuits. Holmes himself was ensconced in his favorite armchair by the hearth, his long, angular frame draped in a burgundy dressing gown, his fingers steepled beneath his chin in that peculiar attitude which betokened the deepest of reveries. His eyes, sharp and piercing even in repose, were half closed, as though he were sifting through the vast archives of his mind, seeking some elusive thread of thought. A pipe rested in his hand, its smoke curling upward in lazy spirals, adding to the hazy atmosphere of the room. The violin lay neglected on a nearby table, its strings silent for the moment, though I knew from long experience that Holmes might seize it at any instant to coax forth a mournful melody. The scene was one of tranquil familiarity, a stark contrast to the restless energy that so often propelled my friend into the heart of London's mysteries. As I settled into my own chair, my notebook open to record the day's observations, I could not help but marvel at the contrast between the chaos of London's streets and the ordered sanctuary of our rooms. The city beyond our walls teemed with life, costermongers shouting their wares, the rumble of omnibuses, the plaintive cries of newsboys hawking the evening editions. Yet here, within the confines of 221B, there was a stillness, a sense of anticipation, as though the very air awaited Holmes's next move. I glanced at him, wondering what thoughts occupied that extraordinary mind, when our reverie was abruptly shattered by a sharp, insistent rap upon the door. Mrs. Hudson's footsteps echoed up the stairs, swift and purposeful, a sure sign of urgency. "Mr. Holmes," she called, her voice tinged with a tremor of unease as she appeared in the doorway. "There's a lady to see you, sir. She's in a dreadful state, says it's a matter of life and death. I tried to tell her you might be engaged, but she's most insistent." Holmes's eyes snapped open, a spark of interest igniting within their depths. He set his pipe aside with a deliberate motion, his posture shifting from languor to alertness in an instant. "A matter of life and death, you say? Excellent. Show her in, Mrs. Hudson, and let us see what storm this fog has brought to our door. Watson, my dear fellow, prepare yourself. I suspect the evening is about to take a most intriguing turn." Mrs. Hudson withdrew, and moments later the door opened to admit a figure who seemed to materialize from the fog itself. She was a woman of perhaps 30 years, cloaked in a heavy woolen mantle dusted with droplets of mist, her auburn curls escaping from beneath a simple bonnet. Her face was pale, almost ghostly in the lamplight, and her eyes, wide, hazel, and brimming with a mixture of fear and determination, darted about the room as though expecting shadows to leap forth from the corners. Her hands clutched a damp handkerchief, twisting it nervously, and her breath came in short, uneven gasps, betraying the agitation that had driven her to our doorstep. "Mr. Holmes," she began, her voice trembling yet resolute, "I am Miss Eleanor Hargrove, a governess residing but a few doors down on Baker Street. I implore your assistance, for a terrible tragedy has befallen my employer, Mr. Reginald Thorne. He was found dead this morning in his study, and the police— oh, they call it an accident, a fall from a ladder whilst reaching for a book, but I know it cannot be so. There are signs, sir, whispers in the fog, a shadow that haunts our street. I fear a sinister hand at work, and I beg you to uncover the truth." Holmes leaned forward, his gaze fixed upon her with an intensity that seemed to strip away the veneer of her composure. "Pray, Miss Hargrove, compose yourself and relate the facts in their proper order. Every detail, however trivial, may prove vital. Watson, a brandy for the lady if you would be so kind." I hastened to the sideboard, pouring a measure of brandy into a crystal glass and pressing it into her trembling hands. She took a tentative sip, the color returning faintly to her cheeks, and with a deep breath she began her tale. "Mr. Thorne was a gentleman of means, an antiquarian with a passion for rare manuscripts," Miss Hargrove explained, her voice steadier now. "He lived at number 215, a grand house filled with treasures from ages past, scrolls, codices, artifacts from the Orient and beyond. Last night he retired to his study as was his custom, working late into the hours. No one heard a sound, not a cry nor a crash, until the maid, Annie, discovered him at dawn. His neck was broken, the ladder overturned beside him, and in his hand, oh, Mr. Holmes, in his hand was a note, a dreadful note that read, 'The shadow falls at midnight.'" I felt a chill, despite the warmth of the room, and glanced at Holmes, whose lips twitched in that subtle manner which I knew signaled the stirrings of fascination. "An accident, the police conclude?" he asked, his tone deceptively mild. "Yet you suspect otherwise. What evidence leads you to this conviction, Miss Hargrove?" She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The fog, Mr. Holmes. It hides secrets. Last night, as I returned from an errand, I saw a figure lurking outside his window, a cloaked man, his face obscured, who vanished into the mist as though he were a ghost. I thought little of it then, dismissing it as a trick of the light, but now— and there is more. Mr. Thorne had enemies, rivals in the world of antiquities who coveted his latest acquisition, a medieval codex said to contain forbidden knowledge, purchased at great expense from an auction in Paris. He spoke of threats, veiled warnings from those who would see it in their own hands. Holmes's eyes gleamed with a predatory intensity. A locked room, a cryptic note, a shadowy figure, and a coveted artifact. Most intriguing. Tell me, was the study indeed locked from within, as you imply? "Yes," she replied, nodding vigorously. "The door was bolted, the windows latched, save for one slightly ajar, though too high for easy entry. The police insist it was a tragic mishap, but I cannot believe it. Mr. Thorne was cautious, deliberate. He would not have climbed a ladder so carelessly." Holmes rose, pacing slowly before the fire, his silhouette sharp against the flames. "And this codex, where is it now?" "In the study still, I believe, locked in his desk. The police showed little interest in it, focused only on the ladder and the fall." "Very well," Holmes declared, turning to face her. "You have done right to come to me, Miss Hargrove. Watson and I shall investigate at once. Return to your home and speak of this to no one. If there is villainy afoot on Baker Street, it shall not escape my notice." Miss Hargrove rose, her expression a mixture of relief and lingering fear. "Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Dr. Watson, I shall await your word." As she departed, her footsteps fading down the stairs, Holmes turned to me, his eyes alight with purpose. Come, Watson, the fog awaits us, and with it a mystery that promises to test our mettle. Dress warmly, for Baker Street harbors a death that demands our scrutiny. I seized my coat and hat, my heart quickening with the familiar thrill of the chase. The fire crackled behind us, the fog pressed ever closer, and as we stepped into the night, I knew that once again we were embarked upon a path where logic would battle shadows to reveal the truth. Chapter 2. Shadows in the Street. The fog of that October evening in 1895 seemed a living entity, wrapping London in a shroud that dulled sound and obscured sight. As Sherlock Holmes and I ventured forth from 221B Baker Street, the world appeared as a watercolor painting left out in the rain. Edges blurred, colors muted, and every shadow suspect. The chill air bit at my face, a reminder of my years in Afghanistan, though no desert wind ever carried such damp menace. Holmes, undeterred by the elements, moved with the precision of a bloodhound, his keen gaze darting from cobblestone to lamppost, seeking traces of the mystery Miss Eleanor Hargrove had laid before us. Our destination was number 215, the residence of the late Mr. Reginald Thorne, whose untimely demise had sparked this investigation. The townhouse loomed ahead, its ivy-clad facade somber in the fog, its windows shuttered like eyes closed against some unseen threat. A burly constable, Jenkins, stood guard at the door, his lantern casting a wavering glow. He eyed us with suspicion, his mustache twitching, but Holmes's card, bearing his name and profession, sufficed to gain entry. The interior of Thorne's home was a veritable museum, each room a testament to his passion for antiquities. The study where death had struck was a chaos of scholarship. Towering bookshelves groaned under the weight of manuscripts, a Persian rug lay askew, and a toppled ladder rested beside the chalked outline of a body. A single gas lamp flickered, casting long shadows that danced like specters. Holmes dropped to his knees, his magnifying glass glinting as he examined the scene with surgical precision. "Observe, Watson," he said, his voice low and intense. "The ladder's position is unnatural, tilted as if pushed, not fallen. And here, in the dust, faint footprints. Note the distinctive hobnail pattern, boots not slippers suggesting a visitor, not Thorne himself." I knelt beside him, my medical eye drawn to the chalk outline. "The neck wound suggests force beyond a mere fall, Holmes. The contusion's angle implies a deliberate blow or push." "Precisely," he murmured, his fingers tracing the floorboards. "And this? Shards of a vial reeking of laudanum. A red herring, perhaps?" I frowned, considering. "Suicide? An overdose leading to a stumble?" Holmes's lips curled in a wry smile. "Misdirection, my dear Watson. The vial was shattered post-mortem. Note the absence of residue on the lips or hands. Our killer is cunning, staging an accident to mask murder." We turned to the household staff, hoping their accounts might illuminate the shadows. The maid, Annie, a timid girl with wide eyes, fidgeted under Holmes's scrutiny. "I heard whispers, sir," she stammered. "From the alley last night. Like ghosts they were, all muffled in the fog." Her words sent a shiver down my spine, though Holmes remained impassive, noting her trembling hands. The butler, Mr. Graves, was a sterner figure, his scarred cheek lending him a forbidding air. He claimed ignorance of any visitors, but faltered when pressed about Thorne's recent activities. "The master kept to himself, sir," he said, his eyes avoiding Holmes's. I sensed evasion, though whether from guilt or fear I could not tell. Holmes proposed we inspect the alley behind the house, and so we stepped into the fog once more. The narrow passage was a tunnel of mist, flanked by high walls and littered with refuse. The air was heavy, the silence broken only by the drip of water from an unseen gutter. Holmes's lantern cast a feeble glow, revealing a discarded cigar butt, its tip still faintly warm. "Cuban tobacco," Holmes remarked, sniffing it. Not Thorne's brand, according to Miss Hargrove. Our intruder has expensive tastes. I nodded, my mind racing. The cloaked figure Miss Hargrove saw, could this be his trace? Indeed, Holmes replied, pocketing the butt. The hobnail boots, the cigar, clues that point to a second presence, one who moved with purpose under cover of fog. As we returned to the study, a philosophical musing crossed my mind. In London's fog, truth hides as readily as a thief, yet every clue, however small, is a lantern to guide the persistent. Holmes would scoff at such sentiment, but I felt the weight of our task, unveiling a death cloaked in mystery. We concluded our initial survey, the fog thicker now as if conspiring to guard its secrets. Holmes's eyes gleamed with the thrill of the chase. The game is afoot, Watson. Tomorrow we delve deeper, into Thorne's rivals and the codex that may hold the key to his demise. As we stepped back into Baker Street, the fog swallowed us, and I felt the stirrings of unease. What shadows lurked beyond our sight, and what truths would Holmes's relentless logic uncover? Chapter 3. The Enigmatic Letter. As the clock struck midnight on that fog-shrouded October night in 1895, the sitting room at 221B Baker Street felt both a sanctuary and a crucible, where the weight of a new mystery pressed upon us. The fire's warmth battled the chill seeping through the windows, where the ever-present fog seemed to whisper secrets it refused to divulge. Sherlock Holmes, my indefatigable friend, paced with a restless energy, his mind a whirl of deductions sparked by Miss Eleanor Hargrove's distressing tale and our initial foray to the scene of Mr. Reginald Thorne's demise. I, Dr. John H. Watson, sat with my notebook, attempting to impose order on the chaos of clues we had uncovered. A toppled ladder, hobnail footprints, a Cuban cigar butt, and the haunting note clutched in the dead man's hand. The shadow falls at midnight. The words echoed in my mind, as ominous as the fog that cloaked Baker Street. Holmes paused his pacing, his sharp eyes fixing on a small parcel he had retrieved from Thorne's study earlier that evening. It lay on the table, unassuming, yet charged with significance. A letter sealed with a wax crest depicting a serpent coiled around a quill, a symbol unfamiliar to us both. "This, Watson," he said, his voice low and deliberate, "may be the pivot upon which our case turns. A letter delivered to Thorne the day before his death, unnoticed by the police in their haste to declare an accident. Let us see what secrets it holds." I leaned forward, my brandy forgotten, as Holmes carefully broke the seal, the wax crumbling like ancient ruins. The paper, heavy and slightly yellowed, bore a script both elegant and menacing, written in a hand that suggested education yet trembled with urgency. Holmes read aloud, his tone measured but laced with intrigue. "Beware the collector's curse. The codex brings death to those who possess it unworthily." The words hung in the air as chilling as the fog outside. I felt a prickle of unease, my medical mind conjuring images of medieval superstitions, curses woven into ancient texts, dooming those who dared to claim them. "A warning, Holmes," I ventured. "Could it be from a rival, envious of Thorne's acquisition of that medieval codex Miss Hargrove mentioned?" Holmes's eyes gleamed, a spark of satisfaction at the puzzle's deepening complexity. "Precisely, Watson. This is no mere threat but a calculated move, designed to instill fear or perhaps to misdirect. The serpent and quill crest is unfamiliar, but its craftsmanship suggests a sender of means and intent. We must trace its origin." He turned the letter over, examining it with his magnifying glass. "Observe," he said, pointing to faint traces of ink beneath the seal. "A hidden mark, a cipher perhaps, or a watermark. The paper is of French origin, likely from a stationer in Paris, which aligns with the codex's provenance. This is no idle warning, Watson, but a clue to a larger game." I jotted notes, my mind racing to keep pace with Holmes's deductions. A rival, then, I said. Miss Hargrove spoke of Thorne's enemies in the antiquarian world. Could this be their handiwork? Holmes nodded, resuming his pacing. One name stands out, Professor Elias Blackwood, curator at the British Museum. Thorne and he clashed publicly last year over a disputed Assyrian tablet. Blackwood, a man of intellect and ambition, was outbid by Thorne for the codex at the Paris auction. Envy is a potent motive, Watson, and Blackwood's reputation for ruthlessness precedes him. I recalled the cigar butt from the alley, Cuban, expensive, a detail that lingered like a scent. Could Blackwood be our cloaked figure lurking in the fog? I asked. Holmes's lips twitched in a faint smile. A possibility, though we must not leap to conclusions. The cigar suggests wealth, but many in London's elite circles indulge in such luxuries. Tomorrow we shall visit the British Museum and test Blackwood's metal. For now, let us consider the note's phrase. The shadow falls at midnight. It implies a deadline, a moment of reckoning. Was it a threat fulfilled or a distraction from the true method of murder? I pondered this, my thoughts drifting to the locked study, the ajar window, the hobnail footprints. The note was clutched in Thorne's hand, I said. Planted, perhaps, to suggest a supernatural cause? Holmes's eyes narrowed. A red herring, Watson, designed to divert the unimaginative. The police, with their plotting methods, saw only a fall. But we see the threads of a tapestry. Footprints, tobacco, a letter, a codex, each is a stitch, and I shall unravel the pattern. As the fire dwindled, I felt a philosophical weight settle upon me. In the pursuit of knowledge, men like Thorne sought to possess the past. Yet how often did such ambition invite peril? The codex, with its whispered curse, seemed a symbol of hubris, a relic that promised enlightenment but delivered death. Holmes, ever the rationalist, would dismiss such musings as fanciful, yet I could not shake the sense that this case touched on deeper truths about greed and its consequences. Holmes paused by the window, peering into the fog as if it might yield answers. The codex itself must be examined, he said. If it remains in Thorne's desk, it may hold clues to its allure and its danger. But first, Blackwood. His reaction to our inquiries will tell us much. I nodded, though a chill ran through me at the thought of confronting a man who might orchestrate murder from the shadows. And Miss Hargrove? I asked. She seemed genuine, but her distress. Could it mask complicity? Holmes's gaze softened, a rare flicker of empathy. Her fear was authentic, Watson, but fear can coexist with secrets. We shall keep her in view. For now, rest. Tomorrow demands clarity, and the fog will not yield easily. I retired to my chair, my notebook filled with the day's observations, yet sleep felt distant. The letter's words echoed in my mind, the collector's curse, and I wondered what forbidden knowledge Thorne had sought, and at what cost. The fire burned low, its embers glowing like the unresolved questions of our case, and outside the fog seemed to thicken as if conspiring to guard the truth. As I drifted toward an uneasy slumber, I reflected on the moral undercurrent of our work. The pursuit of truth, as Holmes practiced it, was a disciplined art, yet it revealed the frailty of human desires. Greed, envy, ambition. Thorne's death, whether accident or murder, was a cautionary tale. To grasp at the forbidden is to invite the shadow. I trusted Holmes's logic to pierce the fog, but in that moment I felt the weight of our task. Not merely to solve a crime, but to understand the human heart that drove it. Chapter 4. Whispers from the Alley. The dawn of the following day in that fog-laden October of 1895 brought no respite from the oppressive mist that cloaked London. Baker Street was alive with the clamor of a city stirring, vendors hawking hot pies, the rattle of carts, and the distant chime of church bells. Yet the fog lent an air of secrecy, as if every passerby concealed a motive. Sherlock Holmes and I, fortified by Mrs. Hudson's hearty breakfast, set out for the British Museum where Professor Elias Blackwood, a potential suspect in the death of Mr. Reginald Thorne, held court among ancient relics. The cryptic letter we had uncovered, with its serpent and quill seal and ominous warning, weighed heavily on my mind, its words, the collector's curse, echoing like a portent. Our hansom cab jolted through the streets, the fog parting briefly to reveal glimpses of London's grandeur. The stately facades of Bloomsbury, gas lamps still flickering in the half-light. Holmes, ever alert, murmured observations about the city's pulse, his mind already dissecting the case. I, Dr. John Watson, felt the familiar thrill of the chase, tempered by the nagging sense that the shadows of Baker Street held more than we yet understood. At the museum, we were ushered into Professor Blackwood's office, a cluttered sanctum of antiquities, mummies in glass cases, scrolls stacked precariously, and the faint musty scent of aged parchment. Blackwood, a portly man with a bushy beard and piercing eyes, greeted us with a forced smile, his hands fidgeting with a pen. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he said, his voice oily yet strained. "To what do I owe this visit?" Holmes wasted no time. "We investigate the death of Mr. Reginald Thorne. You knew him, I believe. A rival in the antiquarian world?" Blackwood's face darkened, a flicker of disdain crossing his features. "Thorne was a thief, sir, outbidding me for treasures that belong in a museum, not a private study. That codex he flaunted, medieval, priceless, was rightfully mine. But dead? A tragedy, of course." His tone lacked conviction and his eyes betrayed a glint of satisfaction. Holmes's gaze sharpened, noting a cigar case on the desk, Cuban matching the alley's clue. "You smoke these, Professor?" he asked casually. Blackwood paled slightly, recovering quickly. "Many do, Mr. Holmes. A common indulgence among scholars. Surely you don't suspect me of foul play." I observed Blackwood's assistant, Victor Lang, a wiry youth hovering nearby, his boots bearing the telltale hobnail pattern we'd found in Thorne's study. Lang's eyes darted nervously, and when Holmes questioned him about the night of the murder, he stammered, "I was at a lecture with the professor, sir, across town. Ask anyone." A red herring emerged. Blackwood's alibi was corroborated by museum records placing him at the lecture. Yet Lang's unease suggested complicity. Holmes pressed no further, but his silence spoke volumes. He had marked the youth as a thread to tug. Leaving the museum, we returned to Baker Street, the fog thicker now, as if conspiring to obscure our Sainoa path. Holmes proposed revisiting the alley behind Thorne's house, where whispers had been heard. The narrow passage was a labyrinth of mist, its walls slick with damp. Our lanterns cast wavering beams, revealing little but shadows and refuse. Then, from a nearby tavern, muffled voices drifted through the fog, harsh, urgent tones. Holmes signaled for silence, and we crept closer, eavesdropping on two men in the tavern's back room. "Lang's in deep," one growled. "Gambling debts piling up. He'd do anything for coin, even for his uncle." The words struck like a match, Lang's motive tied to desperation. Holmes pocketed a scrap of paper from the alley, torn, bearing a gambling house's mark. "Lang's debts may connect him to our cloaked figure," he mused. "But Blackwood's cigar case cannot be ignored. We have a web, Watson, and its strands are tightening." I nodded, my mind wrestling with the clues. Footprints, cigars, debts, and that cursed codex. A moral reflection stirred. In London's underbelly, desperation breeds betrayal, a lesson as old as the city itself. Thorne's pursuit of forbidden knowledge had drawn predators, and we were closing in. As we emerged from the alley, the fog seemed to pulse with secrets, and I felt the weight of our task. Holmes's eyes gleamed with purpose. "Tomorrow we examine the codex itself," he said. "Its pages may hold the key, or the trap." Chapter 5. The Hidden Compartment. By midday, the oppressive fog that had gripped London in October 1895 began to relent, as if begrudgingly yielding to the sun's feeble efforts. Baker Street stirred with its usual vitality, vendors hawking their wares, the rhythmic clop of hooves echoing on cobblestones. Yet within the walls of 221B, a quieter intensity prevailed. Sherlock Holmes and I had returned from our foray to the British Museum, where Professor Blackwood's evasions and young Victor Lang's nervous demeanor had deepened the mystery of Mr. Reginald Thorne's death. The cryptic letter, with its serpent and quill seal and ominous warning, lay on the table before us, a silent challenge. My notebook brimmed with fragments, hobnail footprints, a Cuban cigar, whispered debts in a foggy alley, each a piece of a puzzle that Holmes's relentless logic sought to assemble. Holmes, his sleeves rolled up, was immersed in papers retrieved from Thorne's study, his sharp eyes scanning for clues overlooked by the police. "The codex is key, Watson," he said, his voice low and focused. "But first we must understand Thorne's secrets. A man of his wealth and obsession does not die by chance." Determined to uncover more, we returned to number 215 Thorne's residence, where Constable Jenkins still stood guard, his expression weary but compliant. The study, with its towering bookshelves and lingering scent of aged leather, felt like a tomb, the chalk outline of Thorne's body a grim reminder of our purpose. Holmes moved with purpose to the massive oak desk, its surface cluttered with inkwells, quills, and a locked drawer that had escaped prior notice. "Observe, Watson," Holmes said, his fingers probing the desk's underside. "A craftsman of Thorne's means would not trust a simple lock." With a soft click, a hidden panel sprang open, revealing a concealed compartment. Inside lay a leather-bound ledger, its pages filled with meticulous entries, dates, sums, and a recurring initial. S. I peered over his shoulder, my medical curiosity piqued. "Blackmail payments, Holmes. These sums are substantial, paid monthly to this S. Could it be our shadow from the note? The shadow falls at midnight?" Holmes's lips curved slightly. "A plausible hypothesis, Watson. S may be a name, Smythe, Sinclair, or perhaps Silas, a common enough moniker in London's underbelly. Or it could be a code, a misdirection. The ledger suggests Thorne was entangled in something darker than antiquarian rivalries." As we examined the codex, a beautifully illuminated manuscript locked in the desk's main drawer, I noted its arcane symbols. Medieval alchemical signs, some depicting poisons known to my medical training. "This codex," I said, "contains recipes for toxins, Holmes. Could Thorne have been poisoned? The fall a cover?" Holmes shook his head. "No residue in the autopsy per Lestrade's report. But the codex's value lies in its allure to collectors, or criminals. Its presence strengthens the motive for murder." A red herring emerged when we questioned the maid Annie again. Tearfully, she confessed to pilfering small trinkets from Thorne's collection, pins, a silver spoon, but denied any role in his death. Her distress seemed genuine, and Holmes dismissed her as a petty thief, not a murderer, though her confession briefly clouded our focus. Holmes wired Inspector Lestrade, requesting records on known blackmailers with the initial S, but the Yard predictably clung to their accident verdict, dismissing our findings. As we left the house, the fog had lifted slightly, revealing Baker Street's familiar contours. Yet I felt the case's shadows deepening. The ledger pointed to blackmail, the codex to obsession, and Lang's debts to desperation. Were they threads of the same web or separate snares? A moral reflection stirred within me. Secrets like London's fog obscure truth, but they also bind men to their fates. Thorne's hidden payments suggested a life shadowed by fear, a lesson in the cost of guarding one's sins. Holmes, ever pragmatic, would call this sentimentality, but I saw in it a warning. To seek truth is to confront the darkness within. As we returned to 221B, Holmes's mind was already racing ahead. The ledger narrows our focus, Watson. S is our next quarry, and the codex must be studied further. Blackwood and Lang remain in play, but we need more. Perhaps a visit to London's less savory quarters. I nodded, the weight of the case settling heavier. The fire awaited us, but so did the chase, and I knew Holmes would not rest until the fog of this mystery lifted. Chapter 6. A Night at the Opera. As evening descended upon London in that fog-haunted October of 1895, the city's pulse quickened with the allure of its cultural heart. The Royal Opera House, a beacon of splendor amidst the gloom, drew us to its gilded halls, for Sherlock Holmes had deduced that Mr. Reginald Thorne's season tickets might lead us closer to the truth of his murder. The ledger's cryptic S, the codex's arcane allure, and Victor Lang's gambling debts formed a web of intrigue, and Holmes, ever the hunter, sensed a thread to pull in this glittering throng. I, Dr. John Watson, adjusted my tie, feeling out of place among the finery, yet invigorated by the prospect of new clues. The fog had relented, but the mystery clung as tenaciously as the mist had done. We took our seats in a box overlooking the stage, where velvet curtains framed a scene of medieval pageantry. Holmes, opera glasses in hand, scanned the audience rather than the performers, his gaze darting from box to box. "Thorne frequented this place," he murmured. "His connections here may reveal the S of our ledger, or the motive behind the codex's theft." My own eyes, less trained but no less curious, caught a familiar figure in a box opposite. Victor Lang, the nervous assistant from the British Museum, seated beside a striking woman in a crimson gown, her auburn hair shimmering under the gaslight. "Holmes," I whispered. "That's Lang. And the lady, could she be linked to our case?" Holmes's glasses swiveled, his expression sharpening. "Indeed, Watson, that is Miss Amelia Hargrove, sister to our client Eleanor. A singer of some repute. Curious, is it not, that she keeps such company?" During the first act, we slipped to a quieter corridor where Holmes's keen ears caught a snippet of conversation from Lang's box, muffled by the music but audible in a lull. "The codex is ours now," Amelia's voice purred. "No more debts, Victor." Lang's reply was strained. "But the risk. Blackwood's not done with us." Holmes's lips twitched, a sign of triumph. "A conspiracy, Watson. Lang's debts and Amelia's ambition intertwine. But Blackwood's name, confirmation of his shadow over this affair." A red herring emerged as we approached Amelia during intermission. She greeted us with a radiant smile, claiming she was merely consoling Lang after Thorne's death. "Poor Victor's distraught," she said, her eyes wide with feigned innocence. Yet I noted a trace of perfume, jasmine matching a scent on the serpent-sealed letter. Was she a pawn or a player? Holmes pressed her gently, his questions veiled as pleasantries. "You knew Mr. Thorne well, Miss Hargrove?" Her composure faltered, a fleeting crack in her facade. "Only as an acquaintance," she replied too quickly. "He admired my performances." As the bells signaled the next act, Lang bolted, his hobnail boots clattering down a side stair. Holmes, with the agility of a panther, gave chase, and I followed, my heart pounding. The opera house's grandeur gave way to the foggy streets outside, where Lang darted through Covent Garden's maze. Hansom cabs swerved, their drivers shouting as we pursued him into the mist, his figure a fleeting shadow. We cornered Lang in a narrow passage, his breath ragged, eyes wild. "I didn't kill him," he gasped. "I only watched the house for Blackwood. He wanted the codex, said it was worth a fortune." Holmes's voice was steel. "And the note? The shadow at midnight?" Lang paled. "Blackwood's idea, to scare Thorne. I swear I didn't push him." His confession, though partial, tightened the web. Amelia's perfume, Lang's debts, Blackwood's ambition all pointed to a coordinated plot. Yet the S remained elusive, and Lang's fear suggested a deeper mastermind. As we released him with a warning to stay close, the fog closed in again, a reminder of the case's opacity. I reflected on the moral thread weaving through our pursuit. Ambition, like the opera's soaring arias, could lift or destroy, and those who chased forbidden prizes risked becoming their own shadows. Holmes turned to me, his eyes alight. "We return to the Codex tomorrow, Watson. Its secrets and those of S await. Blackwood and Amelia are pieces, but the board is larger than we know." As we hailed a cab back to Baker Street, the opera's music echoed faintly, a haunting counterpoint to the mystery unfolding in London's shadows. Chapter 7. The Forgotten Pawnshop. The late afternoon of that October day in 1895 found us far from the familiar comforts of Baker Street, plunged into the labyrinthine depths of Whitechapel, where London's underbelly pulsed with a raw, unpolished life. The fog, though thinner now, clung to the crooked alleys, lending an air of secrecy to our mission. Sherlock Holmes, his sharp features set with purpose, led the way to a pawn shop mentioned in the ledger we had uncovered in Mr. Reginald Thorne's study, a ledger hinting at blackmail payments to an enigmatic S. Victor Lang's confession at the Opera House, implicating Professor Blackwood and a plot to seize Thorne's coveted codex, had tightened the web of our investigation. Yet the shadow of S loomed large, and I, Dr. John Watson, felt the weight of our pursuit as we ventured into this den of forgotten treasures and hidden truths. The pawn shop, a cramped warren of oddities, was presided over by Silas Crowe, a one-eyed pawnbroker whose leering gaze and crooked smile suggested a man well acquainted with London's darker dealings. His single eye glinted like a tarnished coin as he greeted us, his voice a gravelly rasp. "Mr. Holmes, I presume? What brings a gentleman like you to my humble shop?" Holmes's eyes scanned the cluttered shelves, clocks ticking out of sync, silverware dulled by neglect, a chipped bust of Caesar staring blindly. "We seek information, Mr. Crowe, regarding a client of yours, Mr. Reginald Thorne. His ledger records payments to an S. Would that be you, Silas?" Crowe's smile faltered, his hand tightening on the counter. "Thorne, eh? Aye, he pawned a few trinkets, nothing unusual. Paid up regular too till last week. Blackmail, you say? I'm no extortionist, sir." Holmes's gaze never wavered. "Yet your name matches the initial and your reputation precedes you. Thorne paid you substantial sums. For what?" Crowe shifted, his fingers drumming. "A forged artifact, a Roman coin passed off as genuine. Thorne feared exposure, so he paid to keep it quiet. But murder? I'd no hand in that." Holmes's inspection of the shop revealed a faint hobnail boot print in the dust near the counter, matching those in Thorne's study. "Curious," he murmured, kneeling with his magnifying glass. "These boots align with Victor Lang's. Your nephew, I believe?" Crowe's face darkened, confirming the tavern whispers we'd overheard. "Victor's a fool deep in debt. I gave him an alibi for that night. Family loyalty, you understand, but he's no killer." A red herring surfaced. A stolen watch found among Crowe's wares initially pointed to a street thief who frequented the shop. Holmes quickly dismissed it, noting the watch's placement was too convenient, likely planted to mislead. "Another misdirection," he said, his voice low. "The true crime lies deeper." As we questioned Crowe further, he grew evasive, denying knowledge of the codex or the cryptic note about the shadow at midnight. Yet his connection to Lang tied him to the plot, and the hobnail print suggested he'd visited Thorne's study. Or lent his boots to another. Holmes pocketed a scrap of paper from the counter, a receipt bearing the same gambling house mark we'd found in the alley. "Your nephew's debts bind you both," Holmes said. Who else pulls the strings, Mr. Crow? Crow's silence was answer enough, his single eye darting to the door as if expecting rescue or flight. We left him with a warning to remain in London, his shop's ticking clocks a mocking reminder of time's relentless march. Outside, the fog had settled again, softening Whitechapel's harsh edges. I reflected on the moral thread weaving through our case. Loyalty, like the pawnbroker's to his nephew, could twist into betrayal, binding men to ruin as surely as debt or greed. Thorne's payments to S suggested a life shadowed by fear, a cautionary tale of secrets hoarded in the dark. Holmes's mind was already racing ahead. Crow is a link, Watson, but not the mastermind. Lang's debts, Blackwood's ambition, the Codex's allure, they converge, but S may yet be a shadow beyond our grasp. We must return to the Codex and its secrets. As we hailed a cab back to Baker Street, the city's pulse seemed to quicken, its fog a veil for truths yet to be unveiled. I felt the case's weight, not just in clues, but in the human frailties it exposed: greed, fear, family ties twisted by desperation. Chapter 8. Betrayal in the Fog. The fog that enveloped London on that October evening of 1895 seemed to mirror the thickening mystery surrounding Mr. Reginald Thorne's death. Within the sanctuary of 221B Baker Street, Sherlock Holmes and I had woven a web of clues: hobnail footprints, a Cuban cigar, a cryptic letter, a blackmail ledger, and Victor Lang's desperate confession at the Opera House. The pawnbroker Silas Crow's involvement had added another thread, yet the elusive S and the coveted Codex remained at the heart of our quest. As the fire crackled, casting its glow over our familiar quarters, I, Dr. John Watson, felt the case's shadows deepening, each revelation drawing us closer to a truth cloaked in betrayal. A sharp rap at the door broke the silence, and Mrs. Hudson ushered in Miss Eleanor Hargrove, our client, her auburn curls disheveled beneath her bonnet, her eyes wide with renewed distress. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she gasped, clutching her cloak, "I fear I've withheld a truth that may aid you. I beg you hear me out." Holmes's gaze, sharp as a blade, fixed upon her. "Speak plainly, Miss Hargrove. Every omission tightens the noose around the truth." She took a shuddering breath, her voice low. "Mr. Thorne was my uncle, though I concealed this to protect my inheritance. He was a private man, obsessed with his codex, but he feared rivals, Professor Blackwood chief among them. I suspected Blackwood of plotting to steal it, but I swear I knew nothing of murder until that dreadful morning." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Your secrecy complicates matters, madam. Did you know of payments to S in his ledger?" Her face crumpled. "I suspected he was blackmailed, perhaps over the Codex's origins. He spoke of threats but never named the source." I jotted notes, my mind racing. Her familial tie explained her urgency, yet her omission cast doubt. Was she a victim or a player in this deadly game? Before Holmes could probe further, the door burst open and Victor Lang stumbled in, his hobnail boots clattering, a revolver gleaming in his trembling hand. "The Codex!" he shouted, eyes wild. "It's worth a fortune on the black market. Hand it over, Holmes, or I'll shoot." I acted on instinct, my military training kicking in. With a swift lunge, I tackled Lang, my fist connecting with his jaw. The revolver clattered to the floor and Holmes deftly secured it, his movements fluid as a fencer's. "Foolish, Lang," he said, his voice ice. "Your debts drive you, but betrayal seals your fate." Lang, pinned beneath my knee, gasped. "It was Blackwood's plan. He hired me to watch Thorne, to steal the Codex. The laudanum was mine, meant to drug him, not kill. Blackwood pushed him, staged the fall." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "And the note, the shadow falls at midnight?" "Blackwood's idea," Lang confessed, his voice breaking. "To make it seem cursed, to scare off rivals." A red herring resolved. The laudanum vial shattered in Thorne's study was Lang's, intended to subdue, not kill. But Blackwood's role as mastermind crystallized, his ambition the thread tying all clues, cigar, footprints, letter, and now betrayal. Holmes signaled for me to release Lang, who slumped, defeated. "Stay here," Holmes ordered, wiring Lestrade for custody. But as we secured Lang, a shout from the street drew us to the window. Through the fog, a cloaked figure, Professor Blackwood himself, fled, a satchel clutched tightly, likely containing the codex. Holmes sprang into action and we pursued, plunging into Baker Street's misty embrace. The fog was a living barrier, swallowing shapes, but Blackwood's heavy footsteps echoed. We darted past gas lamps, their halos flickering as cabs swerved and pedestrians scattered. Blackwood's figure vanished into an alley, but Holmes's relentless pace never faltered. We cornered him briefly, but he slipped through a side passage, the fog his ally. Holmes paused, his breath visible in the chill air. "He won't escape long, Watson. The codex betrays him as surely as his cigar did." As we returned to 221B, Lestrade's men arriving to take Lang, I reflected on the moral weight of betrayal. Lang's desperation, Hargrove's secrecy, Blackwood's greed, each a shadow cast by human frailty, reminding me that loyalty unchecked could twist into treachery. Holmes's mind was already ahead. "Blackwood's flight confirms his guilt, Watson. Tomorrow we pursue him to the docks. The Codex's secrets and await." As we re-entered 221B, the fire's warmth felt fleeting against the chill of betrayal we'd uncovered, and I knew the fog still hid one final truth. Chapter 9. The Final Pursuit. As night enveloped London on that fog-bound October evening of 1895, the city seemed to hold its breath, its fog a conspirator in the drama unfolding. The betrayal at 221B Baker Street, Victor Lang's desperate confession, and Professor Elias Blackwood's flight with the stolen codex had propelled Sherlock Holmes and me into a relentless pursuit. The threads of our mystery, hobnail footprints, a Cuban cigar, a cryptic letter, blackmail payments to and the cursed codex, had converged on Blackwood, the mastermind behind Mr. Reginald Thorne's murder. With Inspector Lestrade's men at our heels, we raced toward the Thames docks where Blackwood sought escape, the codex his prize and his downfall. I, Dr. John Watson, felt the pulse of the chase, my revolver heavy in my coat, my heart steeled for the confrontation ahead. The streets of London blurred, past as our cab rattled toward the river, the fog parting only to reveal fleeting glimpses of Blackwood's cloaked figure, the satchel clutched tightly. Holmes, leaning forward, urged the driver on, his eyes locked on the trail. "He seeks a steamer bound for the continent," he said, his voice cutting through the clatter. "The codex's value on the black market drives him, but his arrogance will betray him." Lestrade's men, grim-faced constables in dark coats, followed in a second cab, their lanterns bobbing like fireflies. The docks loomed, a chaotic maze of crates, ropes, and swaying ships, their hulls creaking in the tide. The fog was thicker here, the Thames's briny scent mingling with tar and decay. Blackwood's footsteps echoed ahead, leading us to a steamer, its gangplank swaying, a whistle piercing the night. Holmes moved with predatory grace, boarding the steamer stealthily, I at his heels. The deck was slick with damp, the crew oblivious in the fog's embrace. We descended to the hold, a dimly lit cavern of barrels and crates where Blackwood stood, the satchel open, the codex's illuminated pages glinting under a lantern. Holmes stepped forward, his voice cold. "Your flight ends here, Professor. The codex betrays you, as did your cigar in the alley." Blackwood spun, his bearded face contorted with defiance. "Thorne deserved it. Greedy fool, hoarding what belongs in a museum. The codex is mine by right." I leveled my revolver, my military instincts steadying my hand, while Holmes's eyes never wavered. "Your logic is flawed," he said. The hobnail boots, Lang's, lent to you for the deed. The letter with its serpent seal, your warning to Thorne, meant to terrify. You entered through the study window, pushed him from the ladder, and staged the fall. The note, "The shadow falls at midnight," was your flourish, a distraction to suggest a curse. Blackwood sneered, clutching the codex. "You've no proof, Holmes. The police see an accident." Holmes's smile was razor-sharp. "The footprints, the cigar, Lang's confession, the ledger's payments to S. Silas Crowe, your intermediary for blackmail. The web is woven, Blackwood, and you are caught." A scuffle erupted as Blackwood lunged for a crate, seeking escape, but Lestrade's men stormed in, their truncheons raised.